Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I'm Anirban Banerjee. I'm Professor of Sociology at the University of Burdwan. I do research on student radicalism. I'm the content writer of module SM34. In this module, we will study youth unrest and student movement in India. This module forms part of the paper on social movements. Why study social movements? For the sociologist, studying social movements is of great importance because social movements may lead to social change. Social movements have an impact on social policy. Youth play a vanguard role in many social movements. According to Professor T.K. Umen, youth have the following characteristics. Firstly, youth are between the ages 15 to 30 years. Secondly, youth are full of psychic energy. Thirdly, youth are open to a variety of new experiences. And fourthly, youth do not have any vested interest in the status quo. But youth as a concept is of modern origin. There is no concept of youth in ancient or in medieval times. Now, we will discuss the sociological factors leading to youth movements. Firstly, Indian youth have played a major role in national liberation movements. A reading of the history of India's freedom movement shows that thousands of youth have sacrificed their lives and personal liberties for the cause of India's freedom. Secondly, state policy is responsible for youth movements. For example, the reservation policy of the government of India led to youth unrest in 1990 and 2006. Thirdly, unemployment or the fear of it may lead to youth unrest. On 28 October 2015, students of Alia University started an indefinite class boycott demanding job placements. Fourthly, deprivation and injustice leads to youth movements. Deprivation of tribals by the king of Tripura provoked the tribal youth to start a movement to modernize their lives. Fifthly, the education system may make a student critical enough to question the prevailing social norms, as happened with the Young Bengal movement. Sixthly, generation gap leads to youth movements. Generation gap means that there is a wide difference, a gap between the perception of the youngsters and adults. This concept was a useful tool of social scientists to explain youth movements in the 60s of the 20th century. Seventhly, in India, those youths who rebel are usually the middle and lower middle class students. They suffer from all disadvantages of the education system. Eighthly, the alienated youth is a marginalized youth. Alienation from the social or political system may make rebels out of youngsters. The angry youths of Kashmir are rebelling because they are alienated from the Indian political system. Ninthly, many youth movements have used social media to organize. The Nirbhaya rape protest and the Anna Hazare movement may be cited as examples. So we have discussed what are the main sociological reasons for student movement. Now we will discuss the features of student movements. Firstly, students are at a stage of life when idealism is one of their ruling emotions. Secondly, students belong to a small section of society, so student politics is elitist in orientation. Thirdly, which students participate in radical politics? Prior to the Russian Revolution of 1905, a Russian student newspaper classified students into 4 types. Firstly, we have the indifferent crowd, which is indifferent to the student movement. Secondly, we have the academics who favor academic type of movements, say movements related to examination reform. Thirdly, we have opponents of student movements, those who oppose student movements, like nationalists, anti-Semites, etc. Fourthly, there are the politically minded students, those students who are fighting to overthrow Tsarist despotism. These are the students who participate in movements to bring about radical social change. Now, let's look at the psychological factors in student movements. Firstly, students and youth have a great need for taking independent decisions. That is why they desire power. Secondly, students generally have a bitter feeling about the established political forces. They find much hypocrisy and corruption in the establishment. That is why they go against the establishment. Radical attitudes. Thirdly, the education system introduces critical elements in a student's thought. This makes students radical. Students become believers in the need to make fundamental changes in society. Radicalism may be of 2 types. Right-wing radicalism focuses on factors like religious fundamentalism to bring about a society where religious precepts will dominate, or ethnicity, which seeks superiority of a particular ethnic group over others. On the other hand, left-wing radicalism focuses on the need for transcending the present exploitative order and bringing about a new exploitation-free socialist society. Now, we will briefly study Indian student activism. The following are some of the major features of Indian student activism. Firstly, we find a profound anti-colonial stance in Indian student activism. Secondly, Indian student activism is marked by anti-establishment stance. Student activists, whether left or right-wing, are pronouncedly anti-establishment in character. For example, in early 2016, we find a student movement in Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi protesting against Afzal Guru's execution. It was anti-establishment in character. Similarly, in February 2017, the student movement is a part of the ongoing protests in Nagaland over the 33% reservation for women in local bodies. Thirdly, the student movement has generally a progressive stance, but conservative and reactionary elements are also present. We will discuss 3 phases in Indian student activism. These are 1. Firstly, the proto-historical phase. It goes on from the 19th century to 1905. The second stage is the stage of freedom struggle from 1905 to 1947. And the third stage is the post-independence phase, 1947 to present. Now let us briefly discuss the proto-historical phase. Prior to British rule, India was a land without youth. We had an education system centered around tolls, chatuspatis, maktabs and madrasas. Introduction of British rule led to Western education. The major objectives of British education policies were, firstly, to train manpower for British administration and commerce. Secondly, to legitimize colonial rule among the younger generation. But Western rule led to critical thinking on part of Indian students. The first student movement, the Young Bengal movement, centered around the youthful Dirozio, a teacher of Hindu college. It was Dirozio who taught his students to think rationally, to challenge prevalent social norms and beliefs which were irrational and outdated. The students of Hindu college, on one hand, fought against social evils. On the other hand, they criticized the British colonial administration for exploiting India. Indian nationalism got an organizational shape when the Indian National Congress was founded in 1885. We know that Alan Octavius and Hume took the initiative to found the Indian National Congress. Now, three intellectual giants shaped Indian nationalism. The first was Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's inspiring novel, Anandamot, depicted the defeat of the English in a fierce war with the monks led by Satyananda. The song Bande Mataram, incorporated in the novel, inspired Indian nationalists. Swami Vivekananda aroused the interest of Westerners in India when he proclaimed that Hinduism is the most tolerant of religions. At the same time, he exhorted Indian youth to work for India. Rabindranath Tagore wrote inspiring patriotic songs. He personally read agitators during the Swadeshi movement. He inspired Bengali youth. India's freedom struggle actually began with the Swadeshi movement. Curzon's decision to partition Bengal was challenged by the Bengalis. They started the Swadeshi movement. Carlyle's circular banning student politics was challenged by the students. They formed the Anti-Circular Society. Rabindranath Tagore presided over the first session, that is the inaugural session of the society, and he encouraged the students. The Anti-Circular Society was the first political organization of students. According to Sumit Sarkar, the Anti-Circular Society was a totally secular organization. It avoided all religious ceremonies and religious festivals. Aurobindo Ghosh was one of the major intellectual influences on education and student politics during the Swadeshi movement. He served as the first principal of the National College set up by the National Council of Education to accommodate students who had been expelled for participating in the Swadeshi movement from the government-sponsored colleges. In a lecture to the students of National College, Aurobindo Ghosh exhorted them to work for the nation. He said, "Work that she might prosper, suffer that she might rejoice." Students and youth like Khudiram Bose, Kanhailal Datta, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev and Rajguru participated in revolutionary activities. Khudiram's abortive attempt on the life of oppressive British magistrate Kingsford and his subsequent execution made him a student martyr at the age of 16. His martyrdom is commemorated in a folk song, Ekbar Biday de Ma Kure Ashi. Let's listen to the song. Kanhailal Dotto set a new trend in political murder when he killed Naren Goshai, who had turned approver against the revolutionaries within the prison. Bhagat Singh was a prominent revolutionary of Punjab. He was associated with Hindustan Socialist Republican Association. Bhagat Singh was attracted to socialist ideals. Now, let's look at how the student movement was consolidated at the provincial level. All Bengal Students Association, ABSA, was founded in 1928. It was the first attempt to coordinate the student movement at the provincial level. The Bengal Presidency Students Association was founded in 1929. Under the leadership of these two organizations, students participated in non-cooperation movement and the civil disobedience movement. Apart from constitutional agitations, many students and youth joined revolutionary organizations like Anushinal Somiti and Jugantor. Now, let's see how the student movement was consolidated at the national level. The All India Students' Federation was founded in 1936. Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Jawaharlal Nehru were its patrons. The patronage given to the organization by national leaders made the student body a part of the freedom movement. The All India Students' Federation aimed to reform education, increase exchange of ideas between students of different provinces, and prepare students for future citizenship responsibilities. Now let us see how the students participated in the Quit India movement of 1942. The British decided to involve India in the Second World War. The Second World War broke out in 1939 and it continued up to 1945. Now the British, they decided to involve India in the Second World War without the knowledge and consent of the Indian people. This decision provided the spark for the Quit India movement. Students participated in Quit India movement of 1942. According to Altbach, about 15,000 students were involved in the daily organizational work of the national movement. In the post-Quit India phase, the students rallied to the support of the INA prisoners and worked to preserve communal amity. Now, let's look at the Now, India achieved independence in 1947. So, what was the role of the students in the post-independence phase? Now we will discuss. The main trends, first let's look at West Bengal. There was an overall progressive essence in the student movement in Bengal. Students participated in many movements in the 1950s, 1960s and 1970s. Students participated in food movement on 1st September 1959 and quoted martyrdom in police firing. Since then, 1st September is observed as Students' Martyr Day in Bengal. In 1966, students participated in food movement. 15-year-old school student Nurul Islam was martyred in police firing. Now, the 60s were the stormy 60s. And the most significant event of the 60s was the Naxalite movement. A group of ultra-leftist activists started the Naxalbari movement. Naxalbari is a place in North Bengal, the village in North Bengal from where the movement started. Originally a peasant revolt, it soon involved the student community. Inspired by the Chinese Cultural Revolution, the Red Guard movement involved ultra-leftist students like Ashim Chattopadhyay. Ultra-leftist students were very popular on campus. They had in fact captured 65% of the students' unions in colleges and universities in Bengal. But Charu Majumdar's call to boycott unions alienated the revolutionary students from the common students. The Naxalite movement ended in failure due to the wrong tactics of the Naxal leadership and severe repression by the state. Let us look at the 70s in West Bengal. From 1970 to 1977, we find widespread anarchy in education. Criminalization of student politics started. Mass copying made a mockery of examinations. Student politics. Now let us look at the student politics during the Left Front government, 1977 to 2011. In 1977, the Left Front government assumed power after a landslide victory. The Left Front government made widespread educational reforms. It eliminated mass copying. Students were given representation in the highest policy-making bodies of universities, like the Senate and the Syndicate of Calcutta University. Altbach said that only Bengal has an ideologically sophisticated and active student movement. Student politics during Left Front regime was dominated by leftism. But we find that the majority of students were politically apathetic. Now, what was happening in the rest of India? Let's see. The 70s, we find there is a fight against authoritarianism and corruption. India's victory against Pakistan in the 1971 Indo-Pak War enhanced the status of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the then Prime Minister of India. But soon Mrs. Gandhi began to lose her popularity. Why? Due to rising prices and corruption. Jayaprakash Narayan, popularly known as JP, led a mass movement against Indira Gandhi regime. All opposition parties supported him. Indira Gandhi's position was further undermined when the Allahabad High Court unseated her in an election case. The court debarred her for participating in elections for 6 years. The opposition parties demanded resignation of Indira Gandhi. Student organizations like the Navanirman Samiti of Gujarat and the Chhatra Sangharsh Samiti of Bihar put up a united front against the authoritarian policies of Mrs. Indira Gandhi. During the emergency, now to stay in power, Mrs. Indira Gandhi declared emergency in 1975. We may note that there was already an external emergency during the Indo-Pak War, and this was an internal emergency. During the emergency 1975 to 1977, students of universities, especially Delhi University and Jawaharlal Nehru University, fought against the Indira Gandhi the regime, attempt to stifle dissent. Now, we have seen that the 70s was a period of turbulent era in Indian politics. It was a mix of progressive and reactionary trends. During the 80s, however, we find that it was a period of right-wing radical movements. As far as the student movement is concerned, the 80s was a period of right-wing radical movements. Here we will study two prominent movements. One is the Assam movement, which took place in Assam, and the other is the Khalistan movement, which took place in Punjab. In order to understand these movements, we need a theoretical approach. In the lecture, The Orientation of the Youth Movement, Mao Zedong observed, when youths, instead of allying with the people against the oppressors, turn around and oppress the people. This is a counter current in the youth movement. Mao also said that there should be unity in the youth movement. Both the Assam and Khalistani movements may be regarded as counter currents. Now let's look at the Assam movement. Let's look at the main causes of the Assam movement. Firstly, unemployment is a major cause. Secondly, low per capita income. Thirdly, the policy of divide and rule pursued by the British. This needs an explanation. The British made Bengali the official language of Assam. In this manner, British set Assamese against Bengalis. Fourthly, we find that there is an imperialist conspiracy. This is very much evident from the document Operation Brahmaputra. In that document, it was clearly stated that the purpose of the research was to influence the formation of a new state. And fifthly, we find the foreign hand, continuous infiltration of people from Bangladesh. Now, let's look at the impact of Assam movement on contemporary society. The Assam movement was led by two organizations, All Assam Students Union and All Assam Ganasangram Parishad. Now, Prafulla Kumar Mohanto was the leader of the All Assam Students Union, and Brigu Phukon was a leader of All Assam Ganasangram Parishad. The ideology of the movement was linguism. The main demand was deport foreigners. Movement has a wide-ranging impact on Indian society. The decennial census had to be suspended in Assam. Bengalis were targeted. Pogroms of minorities occurred in Mongoldoy and Nelly. Economic blockade of the rest of India was resorted to. The movement, according to Hiren Gohai, the movement was mainly led by Asamiya middle class. Tribals remained, however, indifferent to the movement. Minority students formed their own union, but All Assam Minority Students Union failed to protect their members from the majoritarian violence due to partisan action by the state police. Now let's look at the impact of Assam Accord on contemporary society. After coming to power, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi signed the Assam Accord in 1985. This agreement terminated the Assam movement. Under the Assam Accord in 1985, the Bengalis became second-class citizens. A new student-led government took power. Prafulla Mahanto, he was the leader of All Assam Students Union, became the chief minister. A new party, Assam Gana Parishad, took power. And immediately, Assamification policy started. Assamia was made the official language. Demands of minorities were ignored. Minorities of Barak Valley, led by students, launched a fresh movement in protest against Assamification policy of the government. Having discussed the Assam movement, now let's look at the Khalistan movement. We will study the Khalistan movement in Punjab. Punjab benefited greatly from the Green Revolution. Now let's look at the causes of the Khalistan movement. Firstly, agriculture had reached a plateau stage. It could no longer accommodate many people. Secondly, no industry was established to absorb ambitious, educated, middle-class youth of Punjab. Thirdly, as a result, we find the rise of educated unemployment among Sikh youths. Fourthly, to remain in power, the Congress resorted to the policy of divide and rule. We know that Gyani Zail Singh was the president of India. Now, Gyani Zail Singh at that time was the chief minister of Punjab during the 80s. During his term as chief minister, he turned the state into an institution of Dharam Prachar. Congress patronage led to the rise of radical right-wing religious leader Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. Bhindranwale was counterposed to the more moderate Akalis. Religious fundamentalism greatly appealed to the Sikh youth because in Sikh society, the Sant, a religious leader, commands great respect. The Khalistan movement was openly anti-national in thought and deed. Its ideology was religious fundamentalism. It had international links. We find it had bases in foreign countries like Pakistan, USA, UK, Canada. And the modus operandi of the movement was usurping of the Golden Temple, the highest seat of secular and religious activities. The terrorists sowed dissension between Hindu and Sikh masses. Now let's look at the sociological features of a Khalistani activist. A typical Khalistani was firstly a male youth aged 20 to 30 years. Secondly, he had at least a partial university education. Thirdly, a Khalistani had a middle class family background. And fourthly, a Khalistani was motivated by frustration or nihilist notions. The All India Sikh Student Federation played a big role in Khalistan movement. It had units in all educational institutions. The organization appealed to hero-worshipping Sikh youths to join the movement. Terrorists were portrayed as freedom fighters in the Bhog ceremonies held to commemorate those killed in police action. Members participated in terrorist activities. By June 1984, the situation has become unmanageable. The paramilitary organizations failed to tackle militancy. So Indira Gandhi had to summon the army to subjugate the terrorists. Operation Blue Star led to the recovery of the Golden Temple, the killing of Bhindranwale, but it alienated Sikhs. Indira Gandhi was assassinated and The entire Sikh community was held responsible for her death, and that in the anti-Sikh riots that followed, the Sikhs were further alienated. Now, let's look at the student movement in the 90s. Student movements in the 90s were dominated by caste, ethnicity, and insurgency. Now, let's look at the anti-Mandal agitation. Caste dominated the anti-Mandal agitation of 1990. A commission was under BP Mandal was set up to recommend reservation of jobs for the other backward classes. Now, the Mandal Commission recommended reserving 27% of government jobs for other backward classes, which were essentially castes. On August 7, 1990, the then Prime Minister VP Singh accepted the Mandal Commission recommendations, and students of Delhi University and Jawaharlal University, they started agitating against this policy decision. Mandal set upper caste students like Bhumihars and Rajputs against lower caste students like Yadavs. Demonstrative self-immolations like that of Rajiv Goswami were a unique feature of the anti-Mandal agitation. Why this agitation? Subarlal Pathak observed that violent protests against reservation of jobs due to actual or perceived threat seen by upper castes to their occupational or professional advancement. Let's look at the political fallout of Mandal agitation. The VP Singh government fell at the center. There was an agitation for reservation of jobs for OBCs in Uttarakhand, but the anti-Mandal agitation ultimately failed to reverse the reservation policy, which was upheld by the Supreme Court. Now let's look at the student and youth movements in Northeast India. Ethnicity and insurgency ruled student youth movements in Northeast India in the 1990s. Both these movements may be termed after Mao Zedong as countercurrents in the youth movement. Among the major movements were the Bodo movement agitation based on ethnicity and the Alpha insurgency. Now let's look at the Bodo movement. The major causes of the Bodo movement were land alienation, alleged stepmotherly treatment by central and state governments, divide and rule policies of the Rajiv Gandhi regime. The Bodo Accord in 1993, there was the long agitation of the Bodo led to the Bodo Accord. But the Bodo Accord failed due to personality clashes between the Bodo leaders. The result was insurgency. Terrorist organizations like Bodo Security Force and Bodo Tiger Force ran parallel governments. Ethnic cleansing became a regular feature of the movement. And the Alpha movement was the result of the resentment of the Assamese over the exploitation of Assam's natural resources by the center. They alleged that no attempt was made to economically develop Assam. The result was that a terrorist organization, the United Liberation Front of Assam, emerged. It believed in the ideology of Mao Zedong and Ho Chi Minh, and its main objective was to achieve independence for Assam. Its modus operandi was to punish those who exploit Assam through trade and commerce, extend welfare activities to Assamese people. The Alpha built up a very powerful military organization. Army operations have not fully succeeded in rooting out the Alpha. But though the Alpha was initially popular, it lost the popularity due to its terrorist activities. The most significant was the murder of welfare worker Sanjay Ghosh in Majuli. A student-led revolt against Alpha occurred in Majuli. Now let's look at the major trends in student movement in West Bengal since Parivartan. In May 2011, political change occurred in West Bengal. This was colloquially termed as Parivartan. The ruling left front lost power. Politics in West Bengal, including student politics, took a right-wing turn. Criminalization of student politics returned. There was assaults on teaching and non-teaching staff murdering of student activists, mass copying. Opposition alleged that the student organizations belonging to the ruling party forcibly prevented opposition student organizations from contesting elections. This trend was noticeable in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016 and 2017. And the result was that the student union elections were a farce. The government now favors banning student union elections altogether. But we have grounds for optimism. The students of Presidency University and Jadavpur University use direct democratic methods like referendum to settle important concerns of the students. The Presidency students used referendum to settle the issue of whether Sugato Bose should resign from the Presidency mentor group. By accepting nomination as Trinamool candidate for an MP's post in Lok Sabha, he allegedly betrayed the trust of students. The Jadavpur students used referendum to settle the issue of whether the unpopular Vice Chancellor Abhijit Chakraborty should resign. The Vice Chancellor allegedly ordered police action on agitating unarmed students in the middle of the night without listening to their grievances. The whole cholera movement had centered on the demand for his resignation. In 2006, the government extended education reservation to other backward classes in professional courses to fulfill constitutional mandate. But the upper caste students and youth agitated under the banner of Youth for Equality. Medical and technology students were in front of the agitation. The agitation failed as the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the government. In 2015, the Patidar youths of Gujarat violently agitated, demanding OBC status, but the government refused. Hardik Patel, their leader, was arrested. Well, before we conclude, let's look at the major points which we have made. Youth is a period of time when one is between childhood and adulthood. We have seen that there are many factors involved in youth unrest and student movement. There are sociological factors and psychological factors. Youth have generally been progressive in outlook, but there have also been cases where alienated youth have been led astray in reactionary and anti-national movements. But we cannot but agree that youth have had great impact on government policy. The Nirbhaya rape protest in December 2012 forced the government to drastically alter the laws regarding sexual violence, making them more stringent. And with this, we conclude this presentation. Thank you.